Welcome to Spiritual Steps, a podcast about learning to pray, listen, and grow by taking small steps on the spiritual journey. I'm your host, Stephen Hovatter, and this is episode 19, Bounce Back. In this episode, I want to encourage you to begin again whenever your prayer life collapses. Ouch! What a terrible thing to say. What a terrible thing to say. That is gruesome to say your prayer life collapses whenever your prayer life collapses. Oh, man. I wish that wasn't the reality. I wish that I could tell you that when you're taking these small steps in prayer, that it's just going to roll on in this one giant ball of momentum and that your prayer life was only going to get better and better and better. But hey, that's not been my experience. There's times when you have ups and there's times when you have downs. And sometimes your prayer life just, stuff happens in your life and it just kind of falls, right? Like you just kind of trip up and you come to some obstacle and everything just kind of feels like it collapses beneath you. And all of a sudden, you don't know how to pray anymore. All of a sudden, you don't know how to get back into the routine. You don't know, what to do next. And you just kind of feel stuck, okay? So let's just get real about this. And let me say that for me, okay, like, this what, I don't know, 3 weeks since I've had an episode out, something like that. And part of it was because I went to camp. And after camp, I came back and I was dog tired. And because my routines were totally shot, every piece of my life was out of routine or out of rhythm. And so was my prayer life, okay? And so even though I intended to do the next episode, the first couple of days when I got back, it's kind of hard to get the motivation to do your prayer podcast when your prayer life really isn't there, right? Like I'm just kind of floating a little bit. And so I knew, man, I need to wait until I get a few days together to before I can not just record again, but just kind of get back on track. But guess what? A few days turned into a week, and a week turned into 2 weeks, and then I just felt stuck. And this may, I don't know, for a short podcast like this, to start off with a story like this may come off like a big bummer, it's a huge downer. But I just want to be real about it and say that sometimes that's the flow. And my prayer life, for me, the story of learning to pray has been a huge part, the story of what it means to learn how to bounce back from stuff like this, okay? Not just how to sustain your life so that there aren't bruises. I mean, I think some helpful routines can be an important way of, preventing or at least minimizing this kind of stuff, okay? But it still comes, okay? And I think one of the things that we have to learn as we learn to be people of prayer is that we have to learn what it means to learn that we're always, going to be coming up on these kinds of obstacles, okay? And so our success in the long run isn't the absence of failure. It's our ability to, kind of move back into what we aspire to, right? It's not just our ability to do that, but our the resilience that we have that pushes us back in that way, all right? Like there's always a time for us to recover, I mean, recovery is kind of a big deal. It's one of those things that, it doesn't seem like it should be so as defining as it is. But man, there really is something ultra defining for who we become that is based on how we learn resiliency, how we learn what the Scripture calls perseverance or endurance, right? And I think those things aren't necessarily just being able to breeze through effortlessly through your life, right? Like they're being able to encounter obstacles and challenges and to kind of get through them. Sometimes that means getting knocked down and failing and then finding out what it means to get up and to get back into something on the other side of that. There's this quote that I saw on Twitter. I love this line from James Missioner. It says, character consists of what you do on the third and fourth time, right? Like, I love the mentality of that there's a space for us we're not defined just by what happens in our initial moments, in our initial attempts on anything, right? There is something very defining about what happens to us in our multiple repeated attempts to do the things that we aspire to do, to be the people that we aspire to be, that God's calling us to be, There is a reason why the life of someone who is a disciple of Jesus, why the metaphor of a journey, metaphor of following Jesus on a road, why that's so important to us is because it's not just this straight moment of transformation. It is something that happens to us over the course of our lives, and that means that we're always in this place, right? So the first thing I want to say about what it means to bounce back is I want to give you some, the best I can do for practical advice for these moments, both for those who may be listening right now and your prayer life has collapsed and you're trying to think about what it means to start over, and you just need that encouragement to do it. And for those who are right now in the middle of a solid prayer routine, I want you to know that when this day comes that you experience failure in prayer, not if, when it comes, that doesn't mean that, you need to just give up, all right? So I want to give you some solid, I hope, advice for what it means. And this is kind of what it means for me, okay? Because I deal with this stuff too. All right, so here's the first thing is just to understand, like we're talking about, that we are always starting over. We are always beginning again. Have that mentality in your life of prayer that almost, it's not just like you have these rare punctuated moments of starting over, but really almost every time you go back into the place of prayer, every time you come back to your routine, you are, in a sense, starting over. You are, in a sense, beginning again. Having the mindset of a perpetual beginner, even though we mature, even though we develop maybe some increased capacity, increased skill in prayer, when we have the mindset that we are always beginners, it gives us a sort of resiliency where we are always looking to God, always depending on God for that very next piece, okay? Now, here's the thing. When you have that mentality that you're always starting over, well, that means that when you come to that place where you've, lost your routine for a week or 2 or 3 weeks or 6 months or a year or 2 years, when you come back to it, there may be some difference, okay, in what it means to start over again. But the mentality of being a beginner is also what you're used to, and that's okay, right? So that's the first thing. Have the mentality that you're always starting over. The second thing is when you come to that place, there is so much riding on just your willingness to take the first step forward. Don't feel like you have to rebuild this huge castle, of prayer, this huge routine all at once. Just take the smallest step forward. A single step forward is all it takes to get you moving in the right direction. So much of our life is about momentum. It's about inertia, right? And instead of trying to get to like full speed, full throttle at the very beginning when you begin again, just get yourself moving. If you can get from that 0 to 1, notch, I mean, that is more difficult than getting from 1 to 9, okay? But getting some momentum moving will help you. So even if it means that your small step forward in prayer is, just simply taking 30 seconds to sit, be still, say, God, I want to begin again. Help me. Amen. That's enough, right? Like that's a starting step. And then, maybe even just do that and just let it be for that day. And then the next day, begin again with just a small step. Maybe that prayer is, that, and then you maybe reflect on somebody that you love that you want to, ask God to be with and to help. Okay? Or maybe the next day it's just something that, you begin thinking through some of these other prayer forms we have. Just whatever it is, don't be afraid to take like a micro step, like a very, very small step forward. When we try to get up the gumption to begin with something huge and large, okay? Like if your prayer life before was you're spending a half hour in prayer or something like that, okay? Well, maybe just that small, that creates this threshold that can be difficult to go over to start again. Like I just don't have the energy in me to do this whole long thing that feels unfamiliar to me, and so what you can do instead is that you can just edge forward. Right? Just get things rolling just a little bit, and that'll be like an amazing, tremendous help. Okay. The next thing, third thing, is don't be afraid to use a crutch, okay? This is a great time when you're stuck and you need to kind of start over, when you're beginning again, when you have this, you just need to take that one small step. Man, get something like the Lord's Prayer, or maybe like the 23rd Psalm or something like that, something that's just like seriously familiar to you. And just instead of having this original moment of prayer, have this time when you are walking through a previously written, a crafted piece of prayer, okay? And then when you do that, that gives you this, that place where you don't, you kind of take some of the obstacle, out of your path again, okay? All right, and then so don't be afraid to use a crutch. Like, that's a great way to get started and a great way to bounce back. And then the fourth thing that I'd say is be okay with a small victory, okay? Don't feel like you have to have this monumental conquest in starting over. Just begin with something, and if you can just have that 30-second prayer, okay, then celebrate that and be okay with this small victory. That's the beginning of reconnecting. That's the beginning of building again. And when you do that, when you have some of those smaller victories, it gives you new momentum to start moving together. So have a small victory, celebrate the small victory, and then you'll be on your way. After that, it's just about beginning to string together a few more of those, and you're on your path. Okay, listen, when things kind of fall out from under you and your routine fails, or you fail in your routine, it's hard. It stinks, okay? But it's not the end of the world, okay? Really, it's just an opportunity to, in humility, acknowledge that you are indeed someone who is a beginner. So be willing to begin again. That's all I got for this episode. I'm glad to be back with you, and I'm also glad that my own life in prayer is beginning to, start back forward too. If you have any comments or questions, or you just want to extend this conversation, particularly about this stuff about starting over, then reach out to me. You can reach out to me on Twitter. My username is @StephenHovatter. And if this is the sort of thing that's useful to you, go ahead, subscribe in whatever podcasting app you love. We'll be back soon with a new episode. Until then, keep taking the next step, even if it's a very tiny one. Take that next step that you see in front of you, and may God be with you on each step of your journey.